They say you never truly know who someone is until you see what they do with a little bit of power. But what happens when that power is stolen? I'm talking about the kind of audacity that makes a mistress walk into a billion-dollar boardroom, wear the CEO's favorite color, and sit in the chairman's seat. Like she earned it. She thought she was the future wife. She thought the war was over. But she forgot one crucial rule of business. Never underestimate the woman who built the empire while you were busy chasing the man. Today we're watching the mistress take her seat, and then watching the real boss take it back. The boardroom of Harrington and Styles was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of mahogany and brushed steel, suspended 40 stories above the gray, churning streets of Chicago. The air conditioning was always set to a crisp 68 degrees, cold enough to keep you awake, cold enough to remind you that comfort was a luxury, not a right. At the head of the table sat a chair that no one had dared to touch for 6 months. It was high-backed, upholstered in oxblood leather, and it belonged to the majority shareholder. And today, Tiffany Miller was sitting in it. She wasn't just sitting, she was lounging. She swiveled slightly left and right, the expensive mechanisms of the chair hissing softly. She wore a white silk suit that was entirely inappropriate for a grim Tuesday morning merger meeting. It was bridal white, aggressive white. "Can we get some sparkling water in here?" Tiffany asked, snapping her fingers at Samantha, the 60-year-old executive assistant who had served the company since before Tiffany was born. "And not the domestic stuff, Sam. The Italian brand. With the lime." Samantha froze near the door, her knuckles turning white around her notepad. She looked toward the other end of the table where Grant Harrington stood adjusting his cufflinks. Grant, the CEO, and currently the man orchestrating the most messy public divorce in the city's history, didn't even look up. "Just get her the water, Samantha. Let's not make this difficult." "It's not difficult, Grant," Tiffany cooed, spinning the chair again. "It's standard hospitality. If I'm going to be spending my days here, helping you run this ship, the staff needs to learn my preferences." A heavy silence fell over the room. The other 6 board members, men and women in charcoal suits who controlled millions of dollars in assets, shifted uncomfortably. They looked at their papers. They looked at their watches. They looked anywhere but at the 24-year-old former fitness instructor sitting in the chairman's seat. Arthur Penhaligon, the company's chief legal officer, finally cleared his throat. He was a man of few words and even less patience. "Grant," Arthur said, his voice like gravel. "This meeting is sensitive. It concerns the acquisition of the logistics fleet. It requires security clearance. Miss Miller is not an employee, nor is she a shareholder." Tiffany stopped spinning. Her smile didn't drop, but it hardened. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes that were currently scanning the room with the predatory arrogance of someone who believes they have already won the lottery. "Miss Miller is the future Mrs. Harrington," Tiffany corrected him, her voice shrill against the acoustic paneling. "And as the future wife of the CEO, I have a vested interest in how our money is being spent. Besides, Grant says I have a good eye for branding. The logistics fleet boring. We need to talk about modernizing." She picked up a crystal paperweight from the table, an award given to the company's founder 10 years ago, and inspected it casually, getting fingerprints all over the glass. "Arthur," Grant said, finally looking up. He looked tired. He had the rugged, handsome face that had been plastered on Forbes 3 years ago, but now it was puffy from too much scotch and too little sleep. "Tiffany stays. She's my partner. In life and soon in business. The divorce is finalized in 10 days. Once Jordan signs the papers, Tiffany will be taking a seat on the board anyway. Consider this. early training. Arthur Penhaligon took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The bylaws grant. The bylaws state that non-members cannot be present during voting sessions. If we vote on the fleet acquisition with her in the room, the vote is voidable. It's illegal. So don't vote, Tiffany interjected, slamming the paperweight down with a thud that made everyone jump. Just talk. Brief me. I want to know why we're spending $40 million on trucks when the private jet interior is still beige. It's embarrassing. Grant walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. He looked at the board members with a mixture of defiance and desperation. He needed them to accept her. If they accepted her, his betrayal was validated. If they accepted her, he wasn't just a man who cheated on his brilliant wife with a younger woman. He was a visionary, making a lifestyle change. "We'll do a briefing today," Grant announced. "No voting." Arthur put away the bylaws. "Tiffany is staying, and she's staying in that seat. Get used to the view, everyone. This is the new era of Harrington and Styles." Samantha, the assistant, finally moved. She walked to the table, placed a single glass of tap water in front of Tiffany, and turned to leave. "I said sparkling," Tiffany snapped. "We're out," Samantha said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Then go buy some. Run along." Tiffany shooed her away with a flick of her manicured hand. As the door clicked shut, Tiffany leaned back, crossing her legs. "Okay, boys, impress me. Tell me how we're going to make us richer." What none of them knew, what even Arthur didn't know yet, was that the elevator in the lobby was currently ascending. It was carrying a passenger who hadn't set foot in the building for 6 months. A passenger who had spent those 6 months in silence, gathering receipts, forensic accountants, and cold, hard rage. The new era was about to last exactly 20 minutes. To understand the magnitude of the mistake Grant Harrington was making, you have to understand who Jordan Banks was. When Grant met Jordan 15 years ago, he was a charisma-heavy sales rep with a mountain of debt and a smile that could sell ice to a polar bear. Jordan was different. She was the quiet genius in the back of the logistics department. She was a black woman in an industry dominated by old boys' clubs, and she had learned early that to survive, she had to be twice as good. To thrive, she had to be 10 times as deadly. It was Jordan who wrote the code that optimized their shipping routes. It was Jordan who found the tax loop in the import laws that saved the company $12 million in her first year. When they married, Grant became the face. He was the one who gave the speeches, shook the hands, and posed for the magazine covers. He loved the light. Jordan loved the work. She was happy to stand in his shadow, whispering the strategy into his ear, fixing his ties and smoothing over his impulsive mistakes. She had built Harrington and Styles brick by brick, deal by deal. But 3 years ago, the dynamic shifted. The company went public. The money became astronomical, and Grant started believing his own hype. He stopped listening to her strategy. He started listening to the sycophants who told him he was a god. Then came Tiffany. Tiffany was the event planner for the company Christmas party. She was loud, colorful, and adored Grant's status. She didn't ask him about profit margins or risk assessment. She asked him why he didn't drive a Ferrari. She fed his ego in a way Jordan never could, because Jordan respected him too much to lie to him. When Grant asked for the divorce, he did it over breakfast. He didn't even look up from his phone. "I'm just not happy, Jordan. I need someone who matches my energy. You're too serious. You're always working. Tiffany makes me feel He offered her a settlement, a flat $10 million and the beach house. He thought he was being generous. He thought she was just a helper. He had forgotten that before she was his wife, She was the architect of his entire fortune. Jordan hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown coffee in his face. She had simply wiped her mouth with a napkin, stood up, and said, "I'll have my lawyer contact you." Grant took her silence for weakness. He thought she was broken. For 6 months, Jordan Banks disappeared. She moved into a small apartment downtown. She stopped answering calls from mutual friends. Grant assumed she was wallowing. In reality, she was hunting. Back in the boardroom, the presentation was going poorly. The VP of operations, a man named Bill O'Reilly, was trying to explain why the fleet acquisition was crucial for the Q4 projections. "If we don't buy these trucks now," Bill explained, sweating slightly, "our competitors will corner the Midwest distribution. We'll lose 30% of our market share." Tiffany yawned. She actually yawned loud and unashamed. "Bill, honey," she said, leaning forward. "Trucks are dirty. They're loud. Why are we focusing on shipping? Grant said we should be pivoting to lifestyle products. Perfume, watches, things that are sexy. Who cares about boxes?" Bill looked at Grant, pleading with his eyes for intervention. Grant chuckled nervously. "She has a point, Bill. Maybe we're too focused on the nuts and bolts. Maybe we need to think bigger." Arthur Penhaligon slammed his folder shut. "We are a logistics company, Grant. We move things from point A to point B. We are not a fashion house. If we don't buy the fleet, the stock drops. If the stock drops, the shareholders revolt." "Let them revolt," Tiffany sneered. "Grant owns 51%. He is the shareholders." Arthur stared at her. "Actually, Grant owns 20% directly. The other 31% is held in the Harrington Family Trust, a trust that requires 2 signatures to authorize major strategic shifts." "Right." Grant waved his hand dismissively. "My signature and, well, technically Jordan's. But she's out. She's irrelevant. My lawyers are filing a motion to remove her as a trustee based on emotional instability next week. Until then, I'm acting chair." "Emotional instability?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it?" "She's depressed, Arthur," Grant said, adjusting his tie, looking pained. "She's not thinking clearly. She's vindictive. I'm doing this for her own good. She can't handle the pressure of this level of business." Tiffany giggled. "She probably can't handle looking at herself in the mirror. Have you seen her lately, Frumpy?" Grant laughed. It was a cruel, low sound. "Yeah, she really let herself go." That was the moment the heavy oak doors at the end of the room didn't just open. They were thrown wide. The sound was like a gunshot. Bang! Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was not a frumpy, depressed ex-wife. Standing in the doorway was Jordan Banks. She was wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Tiffany's entire wardrobe. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. Her skin glowed with the radiance of someone who had been sleeping 8 hours a night and drinking the blood of her enemies. She wore 5-inch stilettos that clicked against the floor like a ticking clock. She didn't look at Grant. She didn't look at the board. She looked directly at Tiffany. And then she smiled. "You're in my seat," Jordan said. Her voice was low, smooth, and terrified absolutely everyone in the room. "Excuse me," Tiffany scoffed, though she instinctively shrank back slightly. "Who let you in here, security?" "Security works for the building owners," Jordan said, taking a slow step into the room. "And since I just bought the building this morning, security works for me." Grant stood up, his face losing all its color. "Jordan, what are you doing here? You can't just barge in." "I can," Jordan said, walking until she was standing right next to Grant. She looked him up and down with clinical detachment. "And I did. Now, Tiffany, I'm going to ask you one time politely to get out of that chair. If you don't, I'm going to have you removed as a trespasser. And unlike Grant, I don't settle out of court." The air in the room was so thin, it was hard to breathe. The twists were just beginning. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the server banks in the wall. You could hear the wind whipping against the reinforced glass 40 stories up. And you could hear Tiffany Miller's breathing hitch a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Grant Harrington blinked his brain, struggling to process the information Jordan had just delivered with the casualness of someone ordering a latte. "You bought the building," Grant stammered. He looked around the room as if the walls might contradict her. "That's impossible. The Vanderhoven Group owns this tower. They've owned it for 20 years. They don't sell." Jordan walked over to the side table where the pitcher of water sat. She poured herself a glass tap water, ignoring the lack of sparkling Italian mineral water that Tiffany had demanded, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The Vanderhoven Group was over-leveraged in Asian markets, Jordan said calmly. They needed liquidity fast. I knew that because I read the Financial Times before I check Instagram, unlike some people. Her eyes flicked briefly to Tiffany. "I made an all-cash offer at 6:00 a.m. this morning. The deed was transferred electronically 30 minutes ago. Technically, Harrington and Styles is now a tenant. My tenant." She set the glass down. "And I have a strict policy against unauthorized personnel in executive suites. It raises my insurance premiums." Tiffany stood up so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. Her face was a mask of flushed indignation. "Grant? Are you going to let her talk to me like that? I'm your fiancé." "Tell her to leave him." Grant straightened his tie, trying to regain the alpha posture that usually worked for him. He stepped between the two women. "Jordan, look. This is childish. You bought the building fine. Congratulations. But we have a lease. You can't just kick people out of a meeting. We have tenant rights." Jordan reached into her slim leather briefcase, a Hermes piece that was vintage understated and worth more than Grant's car, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Section 4, Clause B of your commercial lease," Jordan recited from memory, not even looking at the paper. "The landlord reserves the right to remove any non-employee individuals from the premises if their presence is deemed a security risk or a disruption to business operations." She looked at Arthur Penhaligon. "Arthur, you drafted that lease 5 years ago. Am I quoting it correctly?" Arthur, the chief legal officer, looked at Grant. Then he looked at Jordan. He saw the fire in her eyes, a cold, calculated fire that he hadn't seen since the early days when she single-handedly negotiated the Redwood deal. Arthur was a survivor. He knew which way the wind was blowing. "She's quoting it correctly, Grant," Arthur said quietly. "If Miss Miller is not an employee, the landlord has discretion." "I am an employee," Tiffany shrieked. I'm the consultant for brand strategy." "Show me the W-2, Jordan said. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held out a hand. "Show me the employment contract signed by HR, because I checked the payroll database this morning. Tiffany, you aren't in it. You're just a line item on Grant's personal expense card listed as entertainment." The word hung in the air like a slap. Entertainment. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Grant?" Tiffany whined, her voice cracking. "Do something, Asul. Jordan, this is enough." Grant barked, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "Get out, now, or I'll call security." Jordan checked her watch. A Cartier tank, simple and timeless. "You don't have to. I already did." The doors opened again, but this time It wasn't a sleek executive. It was Caleb Stone. Caleb was the head of corporate security. He was 6'4", a former linebacker for the Chicago Bears, and a man who took his job very seriously. For years, Grant had treated Caleb like a glorified doorman, often forgetting his name or snapping at him for minor inconveniences. Jordan, on the other hand, had sent a specialized orthopedic pillow to Caleb's wife when she had back surgery 2 years ago. Jordan knew the names of Caleb's 3 daughters. Caleb walked into the room, 2 uniformed guards behind him. "Mr. Harrington?" Caleb nodded stiffly. Then he turned to Jordan and softened. "Ms. Banks, we received your call." "Caleb," Grant said, pointing a shaking finger at Jordan. "Escort my ex-wife out of the building. She's disrupting a board meeting." Caleb didn't move. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at Grant with a heavy, impassive stare. "Actually, sir," Caleb said, his voice rumbling like a subway train, "I've just been informed by the building management office, which is now Miss Banks's holding company, that there is a trespasser in Suite 400. We're here to remove the trespasser." Grant smiled smugly. "Exactly. Remove her." Caleb turned slowly. He didn't look at Jordan. He looked at Tiffany. "Miss Miller," Caleb said, "I'm going to have to ask you to collect your personal effects and accompany us to the lobby." Tiffany gasped. You're joking. Grant fires you. You're fired." "He can't fire me, ma'am," Caleb said calmly. "Security is contracted through the building owners. I work for Ms. Banks now." The shift in power was physical. You could feel the gravity in the room tilt toward the woman in the navy suit. "No," Tiffany whispered. She looked at Grant, eyes wide with panic. "Grant, stop them!" Grant lunged forward, grabbing Caleb's arm. "You take 1 step toward her, Stone, and I'll sue you into oblivion." Caleb looked down at Grant's hand on his bicep. Then he looked Grant in the eye. "Sir, I advise you to remove your hand. Assaulting a security officer is a violation of your lease and grounds for immediate eviction of the entire company." Grant froze. He released the arm as if it were red-hot iron. "Please, Miss Miller," Caleb said, gesturing to the door. "Don't make us carry you. It's a long walk to the elevator." Tiffany looked around the table. The 6 board members were studying their cuticles. Bill O'Reilly was pretending to write notes. Arthur was cleaning his glasses. No one was going to save her. Tears of humiliation welled up in her eyes, destroying her mascara. She grabbed her white clutch, the one that matched her future wife suit. "This isn't over," she hissed at Jordan as she stomped past her. "He's going to marry me, and we're going to destroy you." Jordan didn't even blink. "Make sure you validate your parking, Tiffany. It's expensive downtown." As Caleb escorted a sobbing Tiffany out of the room, the heavy doors clicked shut, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. Jordan walked to the head of the table, the seat Tiffany had vacated. She picked up the crystal paperweight Tiffany had been playing with, wiped it clean with a tissue from her pocket, and set it down precisely in the center. Then she sat down. "Now," Jordan said, opening her leather folder, "let's talk about why this company is bleeding money." Grant was still standing. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut, but was trying to pretend he was just catching his breath. He walked slowly to the other end of the table opposite Jordan and leaned his knuckles on the mahogany. "You think this is funny?" Grant whispered, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You think you can just buy the building and humiliate my fiancée and think everything goes back to normal? I'm still the CEO, Jordan. I still own the majority voting bloc through the trust. You are just a landlord with a grudge." "Sit down, Grant," Jordan said. She didn't look up from her papers. "I will not sit down," he roared, slamming his hand on the table. "This is my company. I built this." "You sold it," Jordan corrected him, finally locking eyes with him. Her gaze was steady, devoid of the love that used to soften it. "You sold the soul of this company the minute you decided that branding was more important than logistics. And as for the trust, we'll get to that. But first, Arthur, I need you to pull up the Q3 financials on the main screen." Arthur Penhaligon hesitated. "Jordan, strictly speaking, you aren't on the board right now. Grant has suspended your clearance pending the divorce." "Strictly speaking, Arthur," Jordan replied, "I am the largest creditor this company has. I bought the debt regarding the fleet loans from First City Bank yesterday afternoon. If I call in that debt today, Harrington and Stiles is bankrupt by lunch. So put the financials on the screen." Arthur typed rapidly on his laptop. The projector hummed to life. A spreadsheet filled the wall behind Grant. "Look at column D, sir," Jordan instructed the room. "Bill, tell me what you see." Bill O'Reilly squinted. That's the marketing budget. It's up 400% since January." "Correct," Jordan said. 400%. Now Arthur drilled down into the vendor list for that budget, specifically a vendor called Lumina Creative. Arthur clicked. The screen refreshed. "Lumina Creative," Arthur read. "Services rendered lifestyle consultation and rebranding. Monthly retainer, $85,000. The board members gasped. $85,000 a month was exorbitant for a logistics company. "And who owns Lumina Creative?" Jordan asked rhetorically. She pulled a document from her red folder and slid it down the long table. It spun across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Brenda Halloway, the head of HR. Brenda picked it up. Her eyes went wide. It's a shell company," Brenda stammered. "Registered in Delaware. The sole signatory is Tiffany Miller." The room erupted. "That's embezzlement!" shouted David Chen, the CFO. "Grant, is this true? Are you funneling company funds to your mistress?" Grant was sweating profusely now. He loosened his tie. "It's not embezzlement. It's legitimate work. Tiffany has been advising us on the new image." "We needed a younger perspective. $85,000 a month for a perspective," Jordan asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Grant, our drivers haven't had a raise in 3 years. You cut the 401k match last quarter, citing budget constraints. And meanwhile, you're paying Tiffany $1 million a year to tell you to wear better suits." "It's a consulting fee," Grant yelled. "It's standard. It's fraud," Jordan said. "And it's a breach of fiduciary duty, which brings me to the trust." She stood up again, and this time she walked toward the screen. She looked like a professor lecturing a class of failing students. "Grant keeps hiding behind the Harrington family trust. He thinks that because the shares are locked in there, he's untouchable. He thinks that I can't vote him out because the trust requires spousal consensus, and he thinks he can just override me." She turned to face Grant. He looked sick. "But you forgot one thing, Grant. You forgot why we set up the trust in the first place." "To protect the assets," Grant mumbled. "To protect the intellectual property," Jordan corrected. "Specifically the Logos 4 routing algorithm, the code that runs this entire company, the code that I wrote." She pressed a button on a small remote she had pulled from her pocket. The screen changed again. This time it showed a legal document dated 10 years prior. "This is the assignment of rights," Jordan explained. "When I wrote the code, I licensed it to the company. I didn't sell it. I licensed it. And that license is held by the trust." She pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "Clause 12, the morality clause," she read. In the event that the CEO engages in conduct that brings public disrepute to the company or engages in financial malfeasance, the licensor, that's me, has the right to revoke the license for the IP immediately without penalty. She dropped the remote on the table. You're not just looking at a divorce, Grant. You're looking at a complete shutdown. If I revoke the license, the trucks stop moving. The tracking systems go dark. The client's Amazon, Walmart, Target, they all leave within an hour. Without my code, this company is just a bunch of empty trucks and a very expensive lease. Grant slumped into a chair. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that he had brought a knife to a nuclear war. You wouldn't, he whispered. You'd destroy the company. You'd destroy your own net worth. I'm wealthy enough, Jordan said coldly. I can afford to burn it down. The question is, can you... She looked at the board members. They were looking at Grant with a mix of disgust and self-preservation. So here is my offer, Jordan said. Grant, you are going to resign. Today. Effective immediately. You will sign over your voting rights in the trust to me. In exchange, I won't revoke the IP license, and I won't report the embezzlement regarding Lumina Creative to the SEC. You walk away with your dignity, what's left of it, and a severance package that I will determine. And if I refuse? Grant asked, a spark of defiance trying to ignite in his eyes. Then I turn off the code, Jordan said simply. And I call the FBI. Financial fraud across state lines involving a public company. That's federal prison time, Grant. Tiffany won't wait for you there. Grant looked at Arthur. Do something, Arthur. Find a loophole. Arthur Penhaligon closed his laptop. He put his pen in his pocket. I can't represent you, Grant, Arthur said. I represent the company. And the company's best interest is clearly not you. Arthur turned to Jordan. Madam Chairwoman, do you have the resignation papers prepared? Jordan smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. I have them right here. She slid a document toward Grant. Sign it. Use your own pen. I don't want you touching mine. Grant stared at the paper. His hand shook as he reached into his jacket. But just as his fingers grazed his pen, his phone buzzed on the table. He looked down at the screen. It was a text message. From Tiffany. Don't worry, baby. I called my uncle. He's on his way. Do not sign. Grant's hand froze. A strange look crossed his face, a mixture of confusion and sudden desperate hope. Tiffany's uncle. She had never mentioned an uncle. She said she was from a small family in Ohio. Wait, Grant said, pulling his hand back. He stood up, a nervous sweat breaking out on his forehead again, but his voice gaining a frantic edge. I need a moment. I need to consult outside counsel. You don't have a moment, Jordan said. You have 5 minutes. I have rights, Grant yelled. I'm recessing this meeting. Everyone out. Just then the heavy oak doors opened for the 3rd time that morning. But it wasn't security. And it wasn't a lawyer. It was a man in a rumpled beige trench coat, looking very out of place in the sterile luxury of the boardroom. He held a lit cigar ash falling onto the carpet Jordan now owned. Behind him were 2 men who looked less like bodyguards and more like problems. Which one of you is Jordan Banks? The man asked, his voice like gravel in a blender. Jordan stood her ground, though her eyes narrowed. She had calculated every variable. The lease, the code, the fraud. But she hadn't calculated this. I am, Jordan said. Who are you? The man grinned, revealing yellow teeth. Name's Sal. Tiffany sent me. We need to talk about that lease. And that code. He walked into the room, ignoring Caleb, ignoring the board. He walked right up to the table and blew smoke in Jordan's face. "See, Tiffany owes me a lot of money," Sal said. "And she promised me that when she married the big boss here, I'd get paid. Now I hear you're messing up my payday." Grant looked at the man horrified. "Tiffany knows you. Knows me." Sal laughed. "She's my best earner. Or she was until she met you." Jordan felt a chill go down her spine. This wasn't corporate warfare anymore. This was something else. She had cornered a rat, but she hadn't realized the rat had friends in the sewer. The smell of cheap cigar smoke filled the sterile air of the boardroom, choking the scent of expensive cologne and fear. Sal, a man who looked like he had been carved out of rough concrete, leaned against the mahogany table ash, flicking onto the polished surface. His two associates stood by the door, blocking the only exit. Even Caleb Stone, the imposing head of security, tensed. He was trained to handle disgruntled employees and paparazzi, not organized crime enforcers. "I'm waiting." Sal rumbled, his eyes darting between Grant and Jordan. "Tiffany said the future wife had access to the accounts. She said if I needed my money, I come to the source. So who's writing the check?" Grant Harrington looked like he was about to vomit. I don't know what you're talking about. Tiffany is a consultant. She's a respectable woman. She doesn't owe money to people like you." Sal laughed, a hacking, wet sound. "Respectable kid. I met Tiffany 6 years ago when she was running a high-stakes poker game in a basement in Cicero. She owes me 200 grand from a business venture that went south. She told me she found a golden goose to pay it off. I'm guessing you're the goose." Grant stared at him, his mouth agape. The image of Tiffany, his innocent, bubbly, fashion-obsessed fiancée who cried during commercials involving puppies running an illegal gambling ring, was impossible to reconcile. "That's a lie," Grant whispered. "I have the promissory note right here," Sal said, patting his trench coat pocket. "And now I hear this lady," he pointed a thick finger at Jordan, "is freezing the assets. That's bad for business." Jordan Banks hadn't moved. She hadn't flinched when the smoke was blown in her face. She stood with the stillness of a statue, her mind racing through calculations faster than the Logos 4 algorithm she had written. She realized suddenly that this wasn't just an interruption. It was an opportunity. "Caleb," Jordan said softly. "Stand down." Caleb looked at her concerned. "Ms. Banks, these men are armed." "I know," Jordan said, "but Sal isn't here to shoot anyone. He's a businessman. Aren't you, Sal?" Sal narrowed his eyes. "Depends on the day. Today I'm a debt collector." Jordan walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically. She stopped a few feet from Sal. She was half his size, but she radiated a power that made Sal straighten up instinctively. $200,000, Jordan stated. "That's the debt. With interest, $250, Sal corrected. "And Tiffany told you that once she married Grant, she'd pay you out of the company accounts," Jordan deduced, "using the Lumina Creative Shell Company." Sal shrugged. "I don't know the details. I just know I was promised a wire transfer today. It didn't come." Jordan nodded. She walked back to her briefcase, the vintage Hermes, and pulled out another file. This one wasn't red. It was black. "Grant," Jordan said, not looking at her ex-husband. "You were paying Lumina Creative $85,000 a month for 6 months. That's $510,000. Where did it go?" Grant wiped sweat from his brow. "I told you branding expenses market research." "No," Jordan said. She opened the black file. "I traced the accounts. I have a friend at the bank who owes me a favor. The money went into Lumina, and then immediately out to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account solely in Tiffany Miller's name. She turned the file around and showed it to Sal. "She has the money, Sal," Jordan said calmly. "She has over $500,000 sitting in an account she controls. She could have paid you months ago. She didn't." Sal stared at the bank statement. His face turned a dark, violent shade of purple. "She held out on me." "She played you," Jordan said, "just like she played Grant. She told Grant she needed money for branding, and she told you she was broke until the marriage. She's been hoarding the cash. She's planning to run." Grant shook his head frantically. No, she loves me. She's planning our wedding." Jordan looked at Grant with pity. "Grant, look at the withdrawals on the Cayman account. Last week, $50,000 to a suspicious vendor called Skyline Charters." Jordan tapped the paper. "I looked them up. They're a private aviation broker. She booked a one-way flight to Rio de Janeiro. Departed scheduled for tonight at 8 p.m. The silence in the room was deafening. Grant felt his knees give way, and he sank into his chair. Rio. Non-extradition. She was leaving. She was never going to marry him. Sal growled a low, animalistic sound. He crushed his cigar out on the carpet. "Rio?" Sal asked. "Flight 404 out of O'Hare Private Terminal," Jordan supplied helpfully. "If you leave now, you might catch her before she boards." Sal looked at Jordan. For the first time, there was respect in his eyes. He tipped his head slightly. "You're good," Sal grunted. "Better than him." He gestured vaguely at the broken man in the CEO chair. "Much," Jordan agreed. Sal turned to us all, to his men. "Let's go. We have a plane to catch." As the thugs turned to leave, Jordan spoke up one last time. "Sal." He paused at the door. "Yeah." "Take the service elevator," she said. "It's faster. And Sal, if you ever come into my building without an appointment again, I won't show you bank statements. I'll show you the footage I have of you entering the building to the Chicago PD. We clear," Sal chuckled. "We're clear, lady. Pleasure doing business." The doors swung shut. The threat was gone. But the devastation left behind was total. Grant sat with his head in his hands. The board members, Bill Arthur, David Brenda Foster, and the others were staring at him with open hostility. He had brought a criminal element into their boardroom. He had embezzled $500,000 for a woman who was stealing from him and planning to flee the country. Arthur Penhaligon stood up. He walked over to the pitcher of water, poured a glass, and drank it. Then he turned to Grant. "Grant," Arthur said, his voice devoid of any warmth, "I am officially calling for a vote of no confidence." "Seconded," Brenda Foster said immediately. "Thirded," Bill O'Reilly added. Grant looked up, his eyes red and watery. "You can't do this. I'm the majority shareholder." Jordan stepped forward. "Actually, Grant, about that." She picked up the resignation letter she had placed in front of him earlier. "You didn't sign this," she noted. "But it doesn't matter, because while Sal was distracting you, my lawyers filed an emergency injunction with the Delaware Court of Chancery." She pulled out her phone and checked a notification. "Granted 3 minutes ago," she read. "Based on the evidence of financial fraud and the impending flight risk of your co-conspirator, Tiffany the judge, has frozen your voting rights in the trust, pending a full investigation." She placed the phone on the table. "I am the acting trustee," Jordan announced, "which gives me 51% of the vote, and I vote to remove Grant Harrington as CEO, effective immediately." She looked around the table. All in favor. 6 hands went up, 7 including hers. Motion carried, Jordan said. Caleb. Caleb stepped forward, his face grim. Yes, Ms. Banks. Please escort Mr. Harrington to his office to collect his personal items. He has 10 minutes. Watch him pack. No laptops, no hard drives, no files. Just photos and plants. Jordan, please, Grant begged, standing up and reaching for her hand. She pulled back as if he were contagious. Jordan? I didn't know. She tricked me. I'm the victim here. You're not a victim, Grant, Jordan said, her voice ice cold. You're a volunteer. You volunteered to ignore the budget. You volunteered to ignore your wife. You volunteered to let a grifter into our lives because she flattered your ego. Stupidity isn't a defense. But what about us? Grant pleaded. I can fix this. We can fix this. I'll fire her. I'll testify against her. Jordan. I still love you. I made a mistake. Jordan looked at him. Really looked at him. She remembered the man she had married, ambitious, kind. Funny. And she saw the man standing there now, weak, selfish, and desperate. The man I loved died 3 years ago, Grant, she said softly. You're just the ghost haunting his office. And I don't believe in ghosts. She turned her back on him. Get him out of here, Caleb. The removal of Grant Harrington was swift and brutal. Within an hour, security had escorted him from the building. He stood on the sidewalk of West Wacker Drive, holding a cardboard box containing a framed photo of himself, ironically from a magazine cover, and a dead succulent. The wind whipped his hair, and for the first time in a decade, no car was waiting for him. Upstairs, the atmosphere had shifted from chaotic to clinical. Jordan Banks sat at the head of the table. The oxblood leather chair felt different now. It didn't hiss or squeak. It felt grounded. Okay, Jordan said, addressing the shell-shocked board members. The drama is over. Now the work begins. Bill, I need a full audit of the logistics fleet. If we're going to buy those trucks, we're doing it at a discount. I know the supplier is missing their quarterly targets. Squeeze them for 15% off. Bill O'Reilly nodded enthusiastically, scribbling notes. Yes, Jordan. Absolutely. Brenda. Jordan continued, turning to the HR director. We need to address the morale issue. Grant's lifestyle has been a distraction. I want a town hall meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. I will address the staff personally. We're reinstating the 401k match effective immediately. We'll pay for it by liquidating the executive perks budget. No more private jets for domestic travel. We fly commercial or we drive. Brenda Foster smiled, a look of genuine relief washing over her face. The staff will be thrilled, Jordan. Arthur, Jordan said, turning to the lawyer. Contact the SEC. We're self-reporting the embezzlement. We get ahead of it. We frame it as a rogue executive action, which it was, and we cooperate fully. I want to minimize the stock impact. Already drafting the letter, Arthur said, typing furiously. And Jordan, about Tiffany. What about her? The police are downstairs, Arthur said. Apparently Sal didn't go to the airport. He called in an anonymous tip about her location instead. Seems he decided revenge was better than money. Jordan walked to the window. She looked down 40 stories to the street below. Flashing blue lights illuminated the grey pavement. She saw a figure in a white suit, now stained and rumpled, being led out of the parking garage in handcuffs. Tiffany Miller was kicking and screaming her future wife, Dreams, dissolving into a nightmare of wire fraud, charges, and grand larceny. Behind the police car, Jordan saw a black sedan. The window rolled down just an inch, and a puff of cigar smoke drifted out. Sal had stayed to watch the show. Hard karma, Jordan murmured to herself. She turned back to the room. Tiffany is no longer our concern. Our concern is the reputation of Harrington and Styles. Suddenly the door opened. But it wasn't an interruption. It was Samantha, the executive assistant. She was carrying a silver tray. On it was a bottle of Italian sparkling water, the expensive kind with the lime essence, and a crystal glass. "I found some in the reserve pantry, Miss Banks," Samantha said, a small, knowing smile on her face. "I thought you might be thirsty." Jordan smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Sam. You're a lifesaver." Samantha set the water down. "And ma'am, Mr. Harrington is in the lobby. He's asking to come up. He says he forgot his keys." Jordan took a sip of the water. It was crisp cold and tasted like victory. "Tell security that Mr. Harrington is a non-employee," Jordan said. "And per building policy, non-employees are not permitted in executive areas without an appointment. He can mail his request to the facilities department." Samantha beamed. "I'll tell him right away." As Samantha left, Jordan looked at the crystal paperweight on the table. She picked it up. It was heavy, solid. It was the award for Innovator of the Year that Grant had won 5 years ago for the algorithm she had written. "Arthur," Jordan said. "Yes, have maintenance come up here," she said, weighing the glass object in her hand. "I want this trash taken out, and order new business cards for everyone. The company name is changing." The board members looked up, surprised. "Changing?" Bill asked. "To what?" Jordan set the paperweight down. "Banks Logistics," she said. "It's time the name on the door matched the person doing the work." The meeting continued for another 3 hours. For the first time in years, there was no shouting, no ego, no grandstanding. There was just strategy numbers, and the hum of a machine finally being operated by a master mechanic. By the time Jordan left the building, it was dark. The city lights of Chicago were reflecting off the wet pavement. She walked to the curb. She didn't have a driver. She had fired the chauffeurs hours ago to save costs. She raised her hand to hail a taxi. A car pulled up. It wasn't a taxi. It was Grant's Porsche. Grant rolled down the window. He looked pathetic. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned. He had been crying. "Jordan," he rasped. "Please. I have nowhere to go. Tiffany emptied my personal accounts, too. She had my passwords. I can't even check into a hotel. My cards are declined." Jordan looked at him. This man who had promised to love her, honor her, and cherish her. This man who had thrown her aside the moment he thought he found something shinier. "You have the beach house, Grant," Jordan said. "It was part of the settlement you offered me. Remember, you said I could have it. But since I never signed the papers, it's technically still yours. The beach house is winterized," Grant whined. "The water is turned off. It's freezing." "Then you better start driving," Jordan said, checking her watch. "It's a 3-hour drive. If you hurry, you might get there before the snow starts." "Jordan, don't do this," he begged. "I'm your husband." Jordan opened the back door of a yellow taxi that had just pulled up behind the Porsche. "You're my ex-husband, Grant," she said, "and honestly, you were never really my partner. You were just the overhead cost." She got into the taxi. "Driver, take me to the Langham. I have a celebration dinner to attend." "With who?" Grant shouted out the window, desperation clawing at his voice. "Who are you celebrating with?" Jordan rolled down her window as the taxi began to pull away. "With myself," she said. "The best partner I've ever had." The taxi merged into traffic, leaving Grant Harrington alone in his sports car, with no gas money. A frozen house and the bitter taste of regret that would last him a lifetime. 6 months later, the winter snow had melted from the streets of Chicago. But the cold reality for Grant and Tiffany was permanent. Banks Logistics was thriving. Under Jordan's leadership, the stock had climbed 20%. The fleet was modernized without the debt, and the drivers were the happiest in the industry. The Logos 4 algorithm was running smoother than ever now that it wasn't being drained by siphon accounts. The hard karma Jordan had promised arrived in a federal courtroom in March. Tiffany Miller, facing 10 years for wire fraud and embezzlement, didn't go quietly. In a desperate attempt to reduce her sentence, she turned on Grant. She testified that he knew about the offshore accounts, painting him as the mastermind. It was a lie, but it destroyed his reputation forever. She was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Her future wife status was replaced by inmate number 89402. As for Grant, the fall was absolute. Stripped of his assets to pay restitution to the shareholders, Grant was forced to sell the beach house at a loss. He applied for executive roles, but in the tight-knit world of logistics, word travels fast. No one wanted the man who let a mistress bankrupt a billion-dollar legacy. One rainy Tuesday, Jordan was sitting in the back of her town car reviewing the quarterly earnings. She glanced out the window as they idled at a red light near the industrial district. There, standing on a loading dock in a neon yellow vest, holding a clipboard and shouting at a forklift driver, was Grant. He wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the chairman. He was a shift supervisor for a third-rate trucking firm, doing the grunt work he used to sneer at. He looked tired. He looked older. For a split second their eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. Grant stopped shouting. He lowered his clipboard, a look of profound shame washing over him. Jordan didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply turned back to her report as the light turned green. "Driver," she said calmly, "keep moving. We have work to do." The car glided away, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged. 1 year later, the crystal chandeliers of the Langham Ballroom didn't shine half as brightly as Jordan Banks. She stood at the center of the Titans of Industry gala, wearing floor-length and emerald velvet that screamed power. She wasn't just an attendee. She was the keynote speaker. Waiters circled her with champagne, but Jordan held only her own sparkling water, clear, sharp, and bought with her own money. "Ms. Banks?" a reporter asked, thrusting a microphone toward her. "Banks Logistics is up 40% this year. How did you manage such a rapid turnaround after the previous administration?" Jordan smiled, touching the diamond necklace she'd purchased to celebrate her Q4 bonus. "Simple physics," she said, her voice smooth and dangerous. "We stopped focusing on the show and started focusing on the work. I removed the dead weight. The ship naturally rose. Across the city, in a dimly lit basement apartment near the airport flight path, the dead weight was watching. Grant Harrington sat on a sagging sofa, still wearing his grease-stained jumpsuit from his shift at a discount trucking depot. His hands, once manicured, were rough and calloused. He nursed a lukewarm beer staring at the 32-inch screen. He saw the woman he had underestimated. He saw the empire he had thrown away for a pretty face and a bruised ego. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Jordan's blocked number. He wanted to type, "I'm sorry." He wanted to type, "I miss you." But then the screen cut to a commercial. It was a sleek ad for Banks Logistics. The tagline flashed across the screen. "Excellence. No compromises." Grant dropped the phone on the coffee table. He turned off the TV, plunging his small, cold room into darkness. He finally understood the math. Jordan hadn't just taken the house, the company, or the money. She had taken his dignity. She was the queen on the board, and he had played himself right off the table. And that is exactly why you never hand the keys to your kingdom to someone who didn't help you build the castle. Jordan proved that silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. Grant and Tiffany thought they had won the lottery, but they forgot to check who actually owned the winning ticket. In the end, real competence always outlasts cheap charisma. If this story of ice-cold corporate justice satisfied your soul, please go ahead and smash that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow and tells the YouTube algorithm that you want more hard karma stories, just like this one. I also want to hear your verdict in the comments. Did Grant deserve to lose absolutely everything, or was Jordan too harsh by leaving him in the cold? Let me know what you think below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story involving a secret lottery winner and a very greedy spouse. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.